What you're looking at here is one of Newham's lost buildings, and it's an iron chapel, so called because these quickly put up structures that served their communities well were made from sheets of corrugated iron and could be easily, quickly and fairly cheaply built. This was in New Beckton and known as the New Beckton Baptist Church. New Beckton was built in the Port of London Authority land and planted in the working class docklands. In 1888, this building, seating 300 people, was erected in Beaconsfield Street, Beckton E6, for the incoming dockers and gas workers on the Cyprus estate. It was known as the Old Green Chapel or the Iron Chapel because of the colour it was painted on its corrugated iron walls. The chapel served its community faithfully for 90 years, but was caught up in the Docklands redevelopment programme and was suspiciously arsoned in 1978 when it was no longer needed. And that was probably one of the borough's largest iron chapels. But do we still have any iron chapels left? Yes, we do, and I'll be able to take you to one at Plaistow, Cumberland Road. So join me there now.
Hello ladies and gents, hope you're all well. And it's a Plaistow post for this bit. You join me on the intersection of Esk Road, Wanlip Road and Cumberland Road right in front of us. And what you're looking at here is one of the only or few surviving iron or tin chapels, particularly in this borough. We'll cross over and have a look. Here it is, founded in 1915 by Horeb, which is the Welsh Wesleyan Church. There it is. It remained as an active chapel from 1915 to 1939 when the site was sold. It was used in the wartime as a centre for refugees, basically, who had been bombed out. It sat dormant for a few years after the war, and then for about 8 years it was used for various different things or other, including storage for a lumber yard. Come 1960 it became what we see it as today, the Gospel Printing Mission, Cumberland Road, Gospel Hall. And that's what it is today. And that, ladies and gents, is really the only surviving proper iron or tin chapel in the borough. But what were Horeb or the Welsh Wesleyans? We'll have a look at that now.
In the 18th century, the religious landscape was transformed by the coming of Methodism. This was part of a much wider international religious movement. Its emphasis on intense personal devotion, nurtured by preaching, which spoke directly to the individual heart, formed the basis for movements which spread to Britain and also to the American colonies. In Wales, it resulted in two major denominations: Calvinistic Methodism, later known as Presbyterianism, and Wesleyan Methodism, later known as the Horeb Church. John Wesley, who we see here, along with his brother Charles, who we see here, and cleric George Whitefield, who we see here, were the leaders of an evangelical movement which began in the 1720s in Oxford as the Holy Club, a club for the purpose and study of the pursuit of a devout and Christian life. The early Methodists, both Calvinistic and Wesleyan, evangelised within the Church of England and continued to receive the communion at local Anglican churches. They were at pains to avoid being called nonconformists. The British Wesleyan Methodists formally separated from the Church of England during the 1790s following Wesley's death. Under the guidance of Dr. Thomas Coke, a native of Brecon, the British Wesleyan Conference resolved in 1800 to send Welsh-speaking preachers to Wales, resulting in the growth of Welsh-speaking congregations and the early foundations of the Horeb Church. Pendraeth in Denbigh claims to be the first Welsh-speaking Wesleyan chapel in Wales, built in 1801. The movement spread from there on and spread over many places, and that's how Cumberland Road ended up with a Welsh Horeb iron chapel. It's quite a rare thing what we have in our borough, and doesn't get enough attention in my opinion. There are a few of these remaining, but not very many of them at all that still function as chapels. Here we see Chobham Gospel Hall in Surrey, and this is one of the few, built around the same time as our one in Cumberland Road, that still functions as a gospel hall. So, I hope you all found that interesting. Now back to Cumberland Road.
I hope you all found that interesting. And now we're off to our next location, which is on the left, and is not a great old survivor like the one we've just seen. I think 1915, really it survived well. Our one that we saw in the opening piece, as I said, was painted green with red features. So. This way a minute. I'll cross this over. Cross this over would be the easiest option. We are of course walking down Cumberland Road. When I was younger, it was quite a few people aspired to live in Cumberland Road. It was a little bit of an exclusive address, if you know what I mean. Still is if you look at the price tags for some of the houses. And our location on the left, where we are now, was a much loved pub. Sadly no longer with us, but there's a good few memories bopping around of this one. And before we go to it, over here we always knew it by Merlin's, the off-licence. Really, really lovely people. A regular haunt for the teenage Luke when he was bunking off school with friends. And here is our next location, or the site thereof anyway. This is where the Duke of Cumberland pub once stood. The Duke of Cumberland was built just 1 year before the war, in 1938, and we'll go back now for a look at a couple of historic images of it, and for its first publican.
And here you have it, the much loved Duke of Cumberland pub, 101 Cumberland Road, Plaistow, E13. And here you see in 1952, the earliest image that I can find of the pub. The pub itself was built in 1937. In this image you'll see there are some changes between this image and the next one that we'll see in a minute. It's got its original pub sign here with, of course, the Duke of Cumberland on it. And as I say, the pub was built in 1937. And here we have a 1938 beer retailers in London, surname D, from the post office directory. And if we go to the very bottom, we see, marked with the blue arrow, William Stephen Dunk, 101 Cumberland Road, Plaistow, E13. And he was the first publican, and he was publican there from 1938 until 1949 when he died. And here is the pub as many of us will remember it, with of course its different pub sign by this time. It's got the arms of the Duke of Cumberland on it. One of the reasons for that may possibly be because that particular Duke of Cumberland was known as Butcher Cumberland for his actions against the Scottish people, who really was a butcher. So maybe his picture was taken down for that reason. And as you can see, between our first image and this one, shape and everything is still the same. Pub sign's different, and the bottom level is no longer in brick, it has been rendered. And this is how I remember the pub, and this was taken not too many years before it was closed. And that, my friends, is the good old Duke of Cumberland. And it's from spirits of one kind to spirits of another for our next location. So join me again back in Cumberland Road as off we trundle.
Hope you all found that interesting. Once much loved pub. And we're off to the next location now. Also of a religious connection, this one, like our first. And this one I have a good few happy memories of as well, because my nan used to go to this one occasionally. Nearly there, and it's another one that's on the left, and it was known officially as Plaistow Spiritualist Church, but to everyone that went there we all called it Cumberland Road Spiritualist Church. And as an organisation it has rather a long history and an interesting one, really early for spiritualism in this borough. Spiritualism really kicked off big after the First World War, and it's not difficult to see why, because so many lost so many, and so many of those men and that were buried abroad, and the families never saw them again. So of course there's that desperate need to want a connection. Holborn Road, which is just there, we're still on Cumberland Road, but here is our building just on the left, which was once, as I say, Cumberland Road Spiritualist Church. It first started off in 1932. This building was built in 1932. But the Cumberland Road Spiritualists themselves, they started off rather early, in 1902, in a room above a house in Braemar Road. Come 1932, this place was built. It remained as a spiritualist church, active from 1932 until around 2005. About that time, come that period, they couldn't afford the upkeep and the maintenance anymore. It needed a lot of work done on it, a new roof and everything, and they couldn't afford it, so they had to go. It then became a Baptist church for a short while, and that's who put the new roof on. And it is now Alpha Childcare for children 3 months and 5 years. But we'll have a look at the one historic image I've been able to find of this. And if any of you ladies and gents, and that's a long shot, have any of the interior, I'd be very grateful if you could share them.
And here you see Braemar Road, London E13, on the borderlands of Plaistow and Canning Town, where in 1902, in one of the upper rooms of one of these houses, the Cumberland Road Spiritualists first began. Now, spiritualism in this country, as we think of it today, first gets its mentions in the 1850s, but the first official spiritualist meeting was held in 1890. And then, like today, you would have had mediums, of course, and table tipping and table levitating. Like here, the spirit of William Marriott supposedly levitating a table. Then, as today, you unfortunately also had your fakes and frauds as well. And where this very famous man comes in, most famously known for being the creator of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle here, where he comes into our spiritualism story is, he made it his business to go out and find and expose those fakes and frauds, which he did. And he also came across some as well that he had to grudgingly admit that he believed their gifts may have been real. But really, that's where the history of the Cumberland Road Spiritualists began, in Braemar Road, hopefully not in fakery and trickery, but for 30 years they faithfully saved up the money until 1932, when they were able to purchase this location and have the Cumberland Road Spiritualist Hall built, where from 1932 to around 2005 they functioned. And this place did, and probably still does for many of us that are still around, hold some lovely memories. And that, ladies and gents, is the interesting history of the Cumberland Road Spiritualist Church. Now join me back in Cumberland Road as we once again verge from spirits of one kind to spirits of another, with another lost pub.
As I said, a much loved location. I have some good memories of that place as well. My nan used to go there. I can't for the life of me remember the name of the lady that ran it, and she ran it for years. Funny story, really. Her and my nan went to Frederick Road School together in Custom House, and they had a fight in school. And you know, they never forgave each other for that fight. I mean, that's a grudge that was like 50, 60 years old come the time I'm thinking of. They knew how to harbour grudges, the old school, didn't they? They don't make grudges like that nowadays. And where I'm leading you to is the end of Cumberland Road here, and onto Denmark Street for another lost London landmark, another lost London pub. Many of you will remember the old garage and scrap metal yard there. Still running that, the scrap metal yard. But like with the Duke of Cumberland, where we're heading towards is another lost pub. The Army and Navy. Never drank in this one. Sadly, there was a murder in it, which, in or outside it, which saw the end of it, really. Oh look, and he's still got one or two of them, I'll show you. For many years he had lots of old, really beaten up and smashed up classics in his forecourt there, just waiting for people to come along and either rescue them or buy parts off of them. And he still has two left, and the rest of them are modern. And the two I'm thinking of are just here. Oh yeah. I hope that that didn't get picked up. I'll just pause you a sec. And this was the site of the old Army and Navy pub. Going to be luxury flatettes soon. Yet another broken down electric bus. Those electric buses, they're really good, aren't they? They keep breaking down. Anyway, for some historic images of what this place used to be.
And here we have it, the old original Army and Navy pub, shown right in the distance here, marked with the blue arrow. It's not very clear, I know, but it's the only image we've got of the old pub. This photo, dated 1931, was taken right at the end of New Barn Street and very much shows a lost world, just 8 years before the Second World War, that would wipe away everything on the right, our pub, and the buildings that were where the flats now are. A few of the houses and shops on the left survived, and the photographer in this image is standing, if you know Plaistow, roughly around where Sunny Solarium now is, because you can line this up pretty well. By the curve in the road that just starts towards the pub, that curve is still there. So this is our earliest and only image of the old Army and Navy pub. But it was built between 1871 and 1872, the Army and Navy, by Taylor Walker and Co. Brewery Company, who built this place, the Abbey Arms pub, which is just a 2 or 3 minute walk down the road from the Army and Navy. If you'd carried on walking past the Army and Navy, you'd come to this pub just a very short distance away. And as I say, the Army and Navy was built by the same company and was very much in the same style as this pub, the Abbey Arms, but just on 2 levels rather than 3. So I wanted to show this to give an impression of what it looked like, or would have looked like. And as I said, everything on the right, our pub, and a fair bit of stuff on the left, was completely wiped away. It was one of the flying bombs right towards the very end of the war, and it damaged and wiped away great swathes of this street. But we can go a little bit better than the history with this one and give you some details. So off we go for that now. And here we have a list of publicans, landlords and landladies, and starting with our very first publican. As I said, the pub was built between 1871 and 1872, and in the 1871 census we get our very first beer house keeper, who is Jonas Chaplin, beer house keeper, age 60, and he's born in Wingfield, Suffolk. His wife Mary, age 55, she's born in Rickinghall, Suffolk. And Charles Downing, lodger, labourer, age 20, born in Saffron Walden, Essex. In 1872, our next beer retailer is William Atterbury. He appears in the Petty Sessions. He's still there in 1874 in Kelly's Directory. In 1878, we get our first member of the Irons family mentioned, William Irons, beer retailer, Petty Sessions in 1878. Now, William Irons, we're going to go here. We see just below 1878, John Hall, beer retailer. Now, John Hall in 1878 owned the pub. William Irons ran it for him, was basically the landlord. But here we see in the 1881 census, J. William Irons. Now, between 1878 and 1881, William Irons had died, and his son, J. William Irons, took the pub on. And this is what I like with the continuity of this. It stayed in the family for a good while. So in 1881, we find J. William Irons, beer retailer, born in Haverhill, Suffolk. So whether he was any connection to our first landlord, who also came from Suffolk, I don't know. Harriet Irons, his wife, age 41, born in Haverhill, Suffolk. And we scroll down when we come here to their 10 children. William, Elizabeth, James, Caroline, Robert, Thomas, Emma, Ellen, Kate and John. So as well as being landlord and landlady, they were very active in the bedroom department. They were there in 1881. 1882 we find J. William Irons as James William Irons, so we get his proper name. In 1884 we see his wife, Harriet Irons, beer retailer, 1884. 1886, James is back. Now, what happened to James in those 2 years? He went to prison and done just under 2 years hard labour. What for, I can't quite ascertain, but I do know he went to prison and he came back in 1886. 1891, you see William Irons, beer house keeper. He's aged 28, and that is the son of James Irons. In between 1886 and 1891, James had died and the son took over, and living with him is his brother Thomas, born in Plaistow, Essex, and his sister Emma Irons, born in Plaistow, Essex. He's still there in 1896. In 1906, his son James had taken it over. He was there in 1914, 1917, and we catch him here next in the 1921 census. James William Irons, so he's named after his grandfather, and Mrs. Jessie Irons, bee retailers, those are the ones who owned the place. James William Irons, beer house manager. It's 12 New Barn Street, and he's aged 30 years and 2 months, born in Plaistow, Essex. Frida Irons, his wife, aged 30 years and 6 months, and she's born in Custom House. Nellie Frida Irons, their daughter, aged 5 years and 5 months, born in Custom House. And Doris Louise Irons, lodger, aged 1 year, daughter, aged 1 year and 8 months. 1922, he's still there, James Irons, bee retailer. 1934, he's still there, James Irons, beer retailer. And lastly, we get another member of the Irons family, and I can't quite ascertain whether William T. Irons is James's son or nephew, because there was 2 of them at the time. One was the son and one was the nephew. And between 1922 and 34, James Irons died. Between 1934 and 1938, James Irons died, and it was taken over by William T. Irons. We catch him in 1938, and lastly in 1944. And that is the list of beer retailers that I've been able to find. And our last quick glimpse of the old Army and Navy, bombed right towards the very end of the war in 1944, one of the flying bombs, the last desperate death throes of the Nazis. And that pub was replaced after the war in between 1948 and 1949 with this one, the Army and Navy that many us Plaistowians knew and loved. Here we see it in the 1980s. Here we catch it in 2008, and this is exactly how I remember it, really. And the reason it closed is this nasty little incident. A stabbing incident took place here in March 2016, where 1 man was left dead and 3 left injured. Here we see the pub in 2018. It was closed by this point and in the throes of what we're about to see. Here in 2019, it's been completely boarded up, and that was the end of it, really. It was never going to come back, and we saw it in my part of the video in the process of being built into what's going to become more luxury flats. So that concludes the end of our little journey. Hope you've all enjoyed, and thank you for watching.